now going to work to do a discussion section. Let's pull up the slides. But I think started off with a question that Jillian posed of looking broadly at Roman and Rubin, and what infrastructure exists and might almost exist, and what do we need to build in order to really leverage both Rubin's wide fast deep survey as well as Roman and the high latitude time domain survey. And then also thinking about not just things in survey mode, but also things in TOO mode. So if you expect to look at Rubin TOO mode, that might be a different cadence, and maybe you're looking at things a little differently. And then if we had TOOs in response to, like Roman TOOs in response to a gravitational wave event, you could imagine those looking different from the 5-day cadence. So I wanted to think about both those surveys in terms of like TOO follow-up and survey follow-up. And there were some ideas here of using machine learning, which we had some talks on, putting together like a community definition, and even thinking about how do we serve the community those definitions? Is that a broker? Is that a trove? Is that something else? Can we all agree on how we would search for a kilonova? And then a final question is, what is the best way to report real-time photometry? And so I want to open up the discussion to all of those questions now.
I want to start with a controversial one. Given that I love machine learning and I have done a lot of the codes to classify or prioritize follow-up, I find one of the challenges, especially with Rubin, is if we're searching for orphan kilonova, the cadence will be so sparse that we won't be able to see an evolution that is significant. So I don't think, I would think that the best way to approach this is maybe machine learning as a way to discard potential contaminants instead of prioritizing kilonova orphan ones. The TOO is completely different. And I think there's a lot of expertise in the room about those type of models. And maybe we should focus in like weird supernova shocks and things like that that we should classify with machine learning.
Do you guys think that this is totally solved? So I want to say one thing. I think it's interesting to think about the combination of Roman and Rubin. And I know like until fairly recently, the brokers have been kind of this black box, but it turns out every broker is built differently, and different brokers have different flexibility in terms of adding in new data sets. And it is not a given that every broker can host Roman data or is willing to or has funding to host Roman data. So far, there's commitment from one broker. And so when you're thinking about what do we need to build, you should, this is, I think, on the table is, do we have the infrastructure? Do we have continued funding for the infrastructure? And is there other things that are missing that we haven't thought of or that you really wish we had? So Shreya, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with your points, Azali, and to expand more on the broker integration part of this, I guess, as I mentioned at the end of my talk, part of what we are doing in the LSSC TVS MMA calls, also led by, the discussion is facilitated by Tomas and Robert, as well as to think about, what infrastructure exists in brokers and what, if existed, would really facilitate at least getting to our so-called bronze tier of kilonova candidates. So things that are real extragalactic transients within a gravitational wave localization or within an external, under different external triggers localization. And then it seems like, with some limited tiering from the brokers, that could be passed on to, other community tools like Trove to then go through further with very specific, kilonova based filtering. So yeah, this is a broader discussion, I think, for the brokers as well.
Do you want to pass to Gotham?
Sure. So for the second point, I wanted to put something out there. Every talk this session has focused on Kilauea itself. And to me, that's because we at least have one of those, or nine-ish, if you paid attention to Jillian's talk. And machine learning is good at having a training sample to find things. So that's what we're looking for. But the science question for me is like, where are the R process elements being formed? And it seems to me, and this might be controversial, but given the kilonova rate, and it's always declining, the more LVK observes and doesn't find anything, that's not the only source of R process out there to explain the observed abundances. So the machine learning you need is not supervised things that can find kilonova, despite the focus on that. It's anomaly detection to find stuff that you didn't expect.
So we talked some about infrastructure and what's needed and how to fund it. And we talked about in this section how we have a number of candidates that have different ranking. You can rank them differently. And it's a question, how do you ensure that less who wants to observe the less probable candidates? And these things are all in some sense connected in how we reward work. Like in the Trophy talk, we had what looked like another implementation of a nice way to do a host galaxy association, which is a very hard problem. But I still think we now have 5 or 6 parallel ways where very small teams are trying to do that, and which is, I think, very rarely well funded, especially not long term. And this is something where maybe if that's acknowledged and if that's something that can be lifted out and well maintained and be acknowledged, that would be a good thing. And similarly for all the potential people who could follow up less rewarding or less likely transient, I think that would be great. But I don't think it's enough to get DOI credits or something. I think it would then need to be in some much more organized way where everyone makes sure we're going to observe these candidates together and get the credit together. So I think these things are very hard, but still we're a pretty fractured community with lots of small teams. And I think to get with little funding to get things done, there are more effective ways to do it.
Thanks everyone for the input. I'd say I agreed with the first speaker about Rubin maybe not being tailored to finding these in blind searches, and then highlight, I didn't know Azali's point until she told me last night, but that not all the brokers have the ability to combine Rubin and Roman streams, and just wanted to emphasize that for this science case, this is absolutely necessary. So this is if we care about Kilauea as a community, then we need to be able to do this. In response to the previous point about the community being a bit fractured, I know that JWST has offered these community TOOs recently for things that are very high priority. I think this is a great step forward. JWST is obviously our best and most unique resource to do this, but we could think about, does HST also do this? Chandra, et cetera. So these community TOs, I think, will be really useful in this era of rare transients.
HST is also doing community TOs. I wanted to say one point about the credit problem. I don't want to make it sound like I don't appreciate this issue. I think it's a really big issue, actually. But I am not telling people to go observe the least probable candidate just so we can rule it out, right? I'm telling people just not everyone observe the first most probable, but observe the first, second, and third, right? And I think that's actually a better bet. Once somebody has observed the first one and it's not that, if you are only self-interested and want to find the kilonova yourself, you should not observe the first one again. You should observe the second one, and you should keep going down the list. So I actually think by coordinating in this way, you're you can all work in your own self-interest and still the community will be better off overall.
I think the way to conceptualize that maybe, and this gets to my comments about the score, which I'd love to talk to you in more detail about, is rather than maybe thinking of a ranking, just in, probability, asking what is the data point that would teach us the most given this ensemble of events? And like somebody's always going to be motivated to get that data point because it's distinguishing. Whereas, if this is the number one candidate, everybody chases that one.
So I think an important thing to think about is like the brokers, we're all thinly spread. We want to do as much science as possible, but we are not omni-powerful and omni-resourced, unless you have a pile of money that we don't know about. But maybe this is a time to think we don't need joining Roman and Rubin in scale. We don't need to join 10 million alerts from Rubin and all the alerts that Roman will have at the same time. We can use the brokers to filter down, select the ones that we actually need to join and join only those. Because then we will be using in full power the brokers, but also use as scientists, our community to actually target what we need to target. You don't want to do 1 million of cross matches every night with Roman, or 10 million. It's useless. Just do the certain candidates that seem most powerful after filtering and join with Roman. And then we can find those kilonova, then we can find those afterglows.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Do you see that as being a service broker's offer? Do you see that as the development of a downstream broker for different science cases? Or do you see that as like an individual user, just integrating data from the brokers?
Oh, this is an excellent question, and I don't have a uniform answer. It will depend a little bit on the community. I think there are tools that already exist that are amazing of joining data sets, and we should use them if that's the best for our user. It can be a downstream broker that only makes this joining for kilonova. But if we have a lot of science cases, maybe we can think of putting it a little bit higher in this chain of cascade of alerts. No, I don't have an answer for that. Sorry.
So at this point, it's a little confusing whose responsibility it is between science center or observatory and brokers. I thought when Rubin Observatory released the alert, it included Leica. It's because it's automatic, product from data management at LSST, but I haven't seen any of those. And also the Roman, if it's the transient, will they produce the photometry of the targets or any alert will come out from the science center? That's my question. I thought the brokers are supposed to do classification and more stuff downstream.
There may be people more qualified to. I believe that what the alerts do come with light curve information, but it's light curve information from the survey. It's not light curve information from every survey. Some brokers are combining surveys, so you can get potentially light curve information from multiple surveys, but that's in no way a requirement. And in terms of classification, I don't think that was ever a broker requirement. But I think that is something that people have thought, every broker has enhanced the alerts in different ways, and some brokers have moved in that direction, but I don't think that was a project requirement. Do you have anything you want to add, Eric? Okay, there were no broker requirements. There are light curves in the alerts, and I know at least on the Antares side, those are served as part of what you get out, but you are never going to the Rubin Science platform for alerts. You're always going to a broker for alerts, but there is light curve information from Rubin in all of those alerts. hold on, we have one last question and then we're at the end of our discussion. We need to move on to posters. But continue, we'll have coffee after this and we can continue to talk more. Yeah, last one.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I had a question, and this, the person before me. Anyways, I was wondering if there are unique cases where you need processing, like if there are any types of alerts that you need to process Roman and Ruben data at the same time. And maybe just focusing on those would be better than just trying to process all of the alerts. And then like for the other things, just do what you suggested.
Okay, yes. So I think that's worth thinking about. And maybe this is also something we can talk about in the broker session, because I think it's very relevant to all the different brokers and people can think about this until then. Okay, so we're gonna do today's posters. If all of the poster presenters can come up. Oh, let's actually thank you all for the discussion, and if we can thank everyone in the session.